You're listening to the suitesflow podcast.
You know, we really have to start with this pretty dramatic image because it just nails the frustration that's building up around technology right now. Just picture this. You're sitting in one of those super high-stakes real estate development meetings, right?
Huh?
Millions on the line. And someone's pitching this, I don't know, shiny new AI visualization tool. Suddenly the lead developer just cuts them off, leans in and says flat out, if you pitch me one more AI tool, I'm leaving this meeting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, that developer, they probably weren't exaggerating how tired they are of it all. We're definitely seeing this deep industry fatigue setting in, especially in fields like proptech, construction, property management places built on real tangible stuff and huge financial commitments. It's like this massive AI hangover.
Exactly. And that's what our deep dive is all about today. We're digging into the source material that details this really powerful skepticism. But it's important, to get this right. People aren't rejecting the tech itself. Not really. It's this profound pushback against how it's been sold, how it's been marketed, this whole hype cycle, promising miracles, but then boom, flawed, unreliable results.
And our mission here is really to nail down that crucial difference, it's almost existential, between the AI that basically lies to you and the AI that actually helps close deals. What's so interesting is we're watching these two completely different futures for real estate just colliding right now. You've got the loud, flashy, generative approach trying to grab all the attention, and then there's this quiet, reliable, more focused verification approach.
Right, and the sources make a great point. In this kind of environment, with potential lawsuits hanging over every misleading image.
Yeah.
Trust. That's the absolute scarcest commodity, the most valuable thing you have.
Absolutely. Honesty, reliability, what people are starting to call boring AI. It's not just some marketing angle. It's actually becoming a must-have feature if you want to survive in these high-stakes games.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Why has AI become such a lightning rod, maybe even a punchline in proptech? An industry that's all about physical stuff, bricks, views you can actually see, trust built over time. It's because this skepticism, it isn't just talk. It's based on people seeing the actual wreckage left behind by these earlier tools that promised the world.
Yeah, the sources give some really concrete, almost absurd examples of these AI hallucinations, things that just obliterate professional trust. We're talking AI-generated interiors, right? Where furniture, like beds or couches, just seem to float, like totally detached from gravity.
So wait, like MC Escher's designing the architecture now.
Huh? Yeah, it kind of has that feel, doesn't it? Buildings with structural bits that they defy physics. You see warped staircases, kitchen layouts that make zero practical sense, or maybe a window right where a main support beam needs to be. The AI is just stitching patterns together, without understanding the context, the engineering, the actual reality of the space.
It's basically bad staging pretend to be some grand vision. It's the ultimate letdown for a client who needs solid certainty. And the sources actually pose this really provocative question, kind of a counter-argument to just blindly adopting these things. If your tool gives you something worse than useless, why not just stick with nothing? At least nothing doesn't lie to you.
That really hits the core of it, doesn't it? That wreckage. A misleading render, it does more than just dent a developer's reputation for design. It instantly shatters that foundation of trust. And these gaps between what's promised and what's delivered, they invite real, serious trouble. Lawsuits, for sure. Imagine a wealthy client relying on some perfect AI-staged room, only to find out it's physically impossible to build or get permits for. The legal costs, the reputational damage.
That stuff is catastrophic.
Right.
And in this industry, a bad rep. It doesn't just fade away, it sticks.
Okay, so that really brings us to a turning point. If the flashy, imaginative AI is causing all this wreckage, the only way forward, according to the source material, is this idea that good AI actually needs to be deliberately, boring. It should almost be invisible, right? Focus on verifying data, getting out of the way of the real deal making.
Yeah, and this pushes back directly against what the sources call the gospel of scale.
Tell us more about that, because I think a lot of us assume, bigger data is always better for training AI, right?
Yeah.
We do, yeah. So many tech pitches boast about models trained on millions of images or just terabytes of data. Like sheer volume somehow automatically means it's good or accurate. But the sources argue, in real estate especially, the opposite is often true. Uncontrolled, massive data sets, that's exactly what broods those hallucinations we talked about. You end up with a render showing a balcony door that never actually existed, just because the AI scraped tons of unverified stock photos where that door was common.
But isn't that volume needed for training? How do the sources argue that less data, if it's really controlled, could actually be better, more predictive?
It really boils down to cost and intention. See, it's cheap to just scrape millions of random images off the internet. That gives you breadth. But it's expensive and it's slow to get proprietary, verified, quality-controlled data. Things like actual building blueprints, confirmed occupancy records, professionally surveyed view angles. A lot of these failures, they stem from a kind of institutional laziness, really, chasing that cheap, easy breadth instead of the necessary precision.
So the risk of chasing that easy scale is you're basically letting lies creep into your output because the data isn't tagged, isn't verified.
That's the critical point, the alternative approach. It needs ruthless restriction. You're essentially training the model to put truth before just, possibility. You want your AI to handle specific natural language questions like, show me every available unit in the East Tower that gets direct, clear sunlight at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. Or maybe, which 3-bedroom apartments match this exact view and layout?
Okay, that query sounds simple enough, but the real trick is the system only answers if the actual data supports it, right? The view has to be verified, the sun path known, the balcony dimensions confirmed, the availability locked down.
Exactly. Reliable AI sifts, matches, and verifies facts that already exist. It doesn't invent stuff, it doesn't do visual tricks, it certainly doesn't make headlines. But this boring approach, that's the one closing deals and actually reducing risk.
Which leads us neatly into where this reliable AI should actually be used, in the workflow backend. It must be so tempting for companies to put AI front and center, doing the flashy virtual staging or whatever. But the sources are showing that the really useful stuff, the applications delivering measurable efficiency, they're almost always buried deep, handling the tedious work.
Yeah, if you look at the safest, most useful applications described in the source material, they seem to fall into 3 key categories. And they all respect human expertise.
Okay, let's spend some time on these because this really defines where proptech utility is heading.
Right. So the first one is matching and search. We kind of touched on this. It's about handling those complex natural language queries, but only when the verified data fully backs it up. Moving beyond just simple keywords to really specific complex needs. It helps streamline that initial filtering for serious buyers or investors. Second, and this is arguably where the biggest impact is, back-end automation. This covers basically anything repetitive that just eats up human time and energy. Things like scheduling viewings, doing that first pass on leads based on set criteria, maybe drafting preliminary legal docs, keeping inventory constantly updated, or prepping standard email replies to common questions.
So essentially all the grunt work that frees up the actual experts, the agents, lawyers, developers to focus on the high-value stuff, negotiations, client relationships. Can you give us a sense of the actual time saved there? Is it significant?
Oh, absolutely. Think about a commercial real estate agent managing, say, a portfolio of 50 properties. Just prepping documents and qualifying leads could easily eat up half their week. Now, if AI handles that initial lead scoring and automatically pulls together the needed disclosure forms or viewing docs from stored data, that agent might realistically save 4, maybe 5 hours a week, purely on admin tasks. It's invisible efficiency, sure, but the return on investment is huge.
Okay, and the third category you mentioned was supportive creativity. How does generative AI fit in if it has to play by the rules of reality?
Well, generative tools can still have a role, but you've got to handle them very carefully. AI can be used for, let's say, generative sparks, suggesting interior design concepts, color schemes, maybe staging ideas, but the absolute key rule here is anything generated must be clearly flagged as speculative. And then it needs to be immediately passed to human architects or designers for a reality check, for structural sign-off. The machine suggests, the human verifies.
That sense of humility seems vital, especially when you get into predictive analytics. I mean, we're swimming in data, right? Occupancy trends, demand shifts, ideas for where to put marketing dollars. Ignoring it seems foolish, but maybe over-trusting its certainty is even worse.
That's a really crucial point about market intelligence. When an AI model forecasts demand or suggests how to allocate marketing spend, how should the leadership team actually use that info? The sources are pretty much unanimous on this. These predictions have to be framed as hypotheses. They need to be presented with their uncertainty baked in. And they always need to be paired with sophisticated human judgment, someone who understands the local market quirks, the context, the anomalies.
So you avoid falling into the trap of thinking a machine can outsmart a complex local market without that human nuance.
Precisely. And, the industry data itself backs up this huge shift towards utility over just flashiness. Analysis from mid-2025 proptech trends, it shows sector leaders are predicting that only the tools delivering measurable, verifiable efficiency gains are going to survive the current shakeout.
We touched on automated underwriting scouts earlier. Can you maybe elaborate a bit? What do these tools actually do and why are they catching on?
Yeah, an automated underwriting scout is a perfect example of successful, quote-unquote, boring AI. It automates the initial risk check for big commercial deals or multifamily loans. It crunches thousands of data points incredibly quickly: historical performance, current occupancy, local comps, debt ratios, all that stuff. And then it spits out an initial risk assessment and maybe some suggested terms. Now, it doesn't approve the loan itself, but it dramatically cuts down the processing time for the human underwriter, sometimes by like 90%. That is measurable, quantifiable value.
Yeah, no wonder people are gravitating towards that kind of thing. If you even look at consumer behavior, home buyers seem happy using AI for practical stuff, like estimating payments or searching using verified filters. But the adoption rates for the flashier features, like those renovation visualizations or imagining fantasy kitchens, apparently they're dropping fast.
People are choosing the practical, the useful. They're blending reliable AI outputs with human advice. They're not betting their financial future on some unverified, generated fantasy. It really is utility and certainty winning out over pure imagination and virtuosity.
Which brings us right back to that high cost of overpromising. It seems like to survive this skepticism wave, the basic shift has to be promise modestly, deliver flawlessly.
Yeah.
Because that overreach, that beautiful but impossible AI render just inevitably leads to fights with clients and terrible reviews.
And think about it, real estate runs on fine print and disclosure, right? So being transparent about how AI is being used, it's just non-negotiable anymore.
What are those non-negotiables then, according to the source material? But what absolutely has to happen?
The requirements are really about limiting liability and keeping trust intact. First, you absolutely must label any AI-generated content clearly as AI-generated, no hiding it. Second, you have to disclose when views or environments are speculative, or if they've been digitally enhanced. And third, you need to be upfront and admit when specs are still subject to human verification, or if they might change during the actual construction.
That really feels like the line between using AI as a helpful tool versus, well, intentional deception.
Exactly. AI is just a tool at the end of the day. It amplifies the user's intent. The winners in proptech going forward, they'll be the ones who use it quietly, embedding it where it genuinely helps, without ever deceiving the client. Clarity. That's what high-stakes real estate demands, not illusions. And as the sources really hammer home, one deceptive image, even if it looks amazing, does way more long-term reputational damage than a dozen helpful, boring outputs combined.
So the takeaway seems clear. The tide is definitely turning. It's moving towards the reliable, the real, the future for AI that actually works in high-stakes industries like proptech. It seems entirely rooted in verification, not just virtuosity. It's the boring AI that quietly builds empires, while the flashy stuff causes liabilities and sinks ships.
That's the core tension, isn't it? We've kind of established that one bad image does far more damage than lots of helpful ones. And the industry is shifting hard towards utility, towards verification. So maybe the final thought for you to consider is this. This shift we're seeing in proptech, it suggests the next successful wave of AI adoption won't be about how widely you can imagine things. It'll be about how narrowly and accurately you can verify them. That's a lesson that maybe some other industries think legal, finance, healthcare, currently focused on massive scale and flashy generative AI. They might need to learn that lesson pretty quickly if they want to avoid having their own developer walking out of the meeting moment.
You're listening to the Suitesflow podcast.